Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. Today, I am joined by a very well-known truth seeker. I don't want to say truther because I hate that term. Truth seeker and filmmaker. And he's got his own, I believe he's got his own website, and he also has a YouTube channel. His name's Ryan Dawson. You guys know him from YouTube as Rys2sense, and I want to, or actually it's Rys2sense, like as in Ryan's 2 cents. And I want to bring him on because he is probably one of the most censored truth seekers / truth tellers that I know. Okay, and Ryan and I don't agree 100% on everything, and that's the beauty of it, because I respect his opinion to the point where we can have not only a decent conversation, but we have a very good flow back and forth, and I appreciate all the stuff he does, and I will defend his right to free speech no matter what, because if I don't defend his right to free speech and I let it go, then I'm a scumbag, and they might as well just take mine too. And Ryan has been attacked by not only by YouTube but by the ADL. For what he said about Israel. And it's funny because in talking to Ryan off air, I have been able to dispel the myth that everybody likes. You know, people will say if you talk about Israel, they put you in the Jew firster category. And it's funny because he's not like that at all. In fact, him and I will touch on that later in the interview and everything. But Ryan gets attacked by the ADL because he speaks truth about certain things, and man, they don't like it. So when the ADL comes after you, you know you're doing something right. Okay? I could tell you what, you know you're doing something right when the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, okay, evil group, okay, I could go into details. In fact, I'll let Ryan go into details there in the interview about how evil they are, just in case the listeners don't know. But I would take it as a badge of honor if they're coming after you. And they really don't like him. So he must be doing something right. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Ryan Dawson. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for that intro, and I'm proud to have made the ADL rather angry, and they are a racist group. The ADL has nothing to do with defamation. The ADL is a Zionist group, and they exist to promote Zionism and protect Israel from criticism. And what they do is they hide behind the cloak of fighting anti-Semitism. They try to pretend like Israel equals the Jews, whereas Jews are an ethnicity and Judaism is a religion. Zionism is a political ideology, and that's what the ADL is about. And they are promoting a political ideology of Zionism, which is a racist political ideology, supports an apartheid state of Israel, and have the audacity to hide behind the cloak of protecting Jewish people. And this is an organization that's been caught terrorizing in the US and Canada. They firebombed a man's house in Canada, and they broke into the police departments and stole files in California. It is not an anti-defamation league. That's only in the title. You can't judge something by the title. It's like thinking the Patriot Act's about patriotism because it's called the Patriot Act. They have nothing to do with it. And they've demonized Helen Thomas. They demonized Mersheimer and Walt, the men who wrote the book about AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, and myself as well, and Norman Finkelstein and many others. And if you're Jewish, they'll call you a self-hating Jew.
Yeah, that's what I get called.
They got a label for you.
That's
you
what
get
I get
called
called.
that. Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I get called. I've been told I'm a self-hating Jew, and I just laugh it off because I say, you know, whatever. You guys are just ignorant, and I feel bad for them, and I tell them I feel bad for you. I feel sad for you. I don't feel bad that you're saying that about me because I know better. So you're not going to affect how I feel. But when the self-hating Jew title, you know, comes out, that's just sad because it's like somebody saying you're racist because you don't like Barack Obama. Because you know
that's
that
about right.
It's the same thing. It's stupid. It's just an ad hominem attack. It's a label to try to marginalize you, and I don't play that.
You hate white people because you won't support Nazis.
Right?
That's what it sounds like.
Exactly.
It's that ridiculous. It's like, listen, Israel is a nation that is actively, this is state-sponsored terrorism, bulldozing down people's houses, children and everything, just smash their house down, burn their crops, uproot their olive trees and things, completely destroy communities and force them into refugee camps or to be homeless. They don't care, and sometimes they just shoot them. I mean, it's complete like frontier style colonization. It's just the new Indians are the Palestinians and the new settlers are the Zionists. Not hating that makes you prejudiced. I mean, that's so backwards. You're racist because you won't support our racial apartheid.
Well, if you change the names of the characters and the players in the game, and you made it cowboys and Indians again, okay, people would go, "Oh my God, what we did to the Native Americans that were here, the natives that were here, it's horrible. We have to atone for that. Oh my God!" But you're allowing that very same thing to happen somewhere else on the planet, and not only are you allowing it to happen, you're supporting it blindly without even opening your eyes and looking at it. You know, one thing
Well,
that
the
really
U.S. is paying for it.
you notice how nobody ever looks at this stuff, Ryan? Like, you'll bring this evidence to somebody. You could bring a truckload of evidence to somebody, and they won't even look at it. It's like they'll turn their back and go, la 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 la. I want to believe what I want to believe. La 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 la. You know what I mean? Like, how is that adult like? How is that? How
No,
is that?
it's like
How is that?
arguing with a religious cult.
You ever see those morons that go out and protest the military funerals?
Yep.
Those people are
It's
nuts. What is it?
disgusting.
The Southern Baptist
To protest
Idiot
any
Church?
funeral is disgusting.
Exactly. There's a time
Oh,
and
I
place
don't
for
know. I don't even
political.
want to give them negative attention. Just some kooks in Texas. That's
Yeah,
all
I
I'll
don't even
say.
remember the name of the group, to be honest with you. I can't pronounce it properly, but they're they're nuts, and they protest anything just to push. Well, this is what God says. This is what that's fanaticism. That's the hardcore, nutty right wing version of we don't like Muslims. They want to kill everybody. Those guys are fanatical. Well, so is that. That's the same type of
Sharia law.
fanaticism. You know.
It's like Jerry Falwell blamed gays for 9/11.
Yeah,
He was
because
a preacher in
homosexuals caused
Virginia.
9/11 because it was the gay mafia that got together and let Osama bin Laden into the country, right? And used him as a CIA asset. Ugh.
No, even beyond that, he was like, God did it as punishment for allowing whatever. That's
What a
they're
scumbag.
crazy people. They're crazy people. I mean, it's a fine line between crazy and super religious. You
Exactly. And
can't tell the difference.
I'm not picking on people that are religious, but you know what? Like, I have an issue when you start when you can believe in whatever you want to believe. That's the beauty of this country. But don't in turn around and then violate someone else's First Amendment because you don't like what they're saying, or you don't believe in what they believe in. I mean, that's even with the Occupy Wall Street that's happening. They have people, and it's gotten brought up. I see in their little chat in their live stream. I see it all the time. When I go in there to see what's going on and I check the live stream, the chat comes up, and all you can do is watch it for 10 seconds, and you'll see someone will say something, and there'll be one or two other people that don't like what they said and get quote unquote offended at what they say, and they literally call for the moderator, please kick him out. We don't like what he's saying. He's just spewing hate
Yeah.
speech, or he's just spewing lies.
It's the consensus mob. And it's like, oh, well, we decided we don't all agree with this person, so you're out of here. It's called a consensus mob. And, it's not all the Wall Streeters, but, I mean, there's
No, not
definitely a
all.
mixed bag, and it's case by case, but there's a bunch of Reds out there for sure.
Oh,
I mean,
without a doubt.
these people blow my mind because this is the thing, all right? That I try to break it down for them in, like, a sentence or two, because that's all you're going to get in sometimes, If the corporations are being enabled by the government and the government's being enabled by the Fed, where's the root of the problem? The Fed, But these people are like, oh, we don't like the relationship between big business and state, so we want an even bigger state. What? If the problem is the government allocating your money to corporations, corporate welfare, bailouts, however you want to title it, then the state is part of the problem. That's who's giving away your money. If they didn't have the ability to award your money to these corporations, then their lobbies wouldn't matter. The reason they go to the pork barrel and lobby to the government is because the government has the power to divvy out your money to all these select industries. And that's not the only form, isn't through bailouts. Sometimes they do it through contracts, but they're no bid contracts, or they do it through military spending or what have you, where they get blank checks from Congress to divide however they want, which of course they give to themselves. But there is a disconnect there. People are just are angry at these banks, yet not the government. They won't blame Obama. When Bush was only responsible for one bailout, the rest were all on Obama's watch. He is Mr. Goldman Sachs. Look at his cabinet. It's a bunch of Goldman Sachs employees or former employees. He is the bankster.
Are you tired of
They
hearing
gave
it's
away
Bush's
your money.
fault?
I'm tired of hearing it's Bush's fault or Obama's fault. I mean, they both did it. Both parties are the same, but of the two, Obama's been worse on the bailouts. Beyond that, it was you can start with Greenspan and then later Bernanke. I mean, the Fed is the main culprit here, because beyond the bailout money and the TARP and the rest of it, the Fed had a secretive bailout. They spent 9 to 15 trillion, I've heard different numbers, dollars on secretive bailouts, and about 5 trillion of it went to foreign banks. And this is only from a partial audit. So this is a partial knowledge from a partial audit. We don't know the full extent of the money that was being spent. But for example, they gave all this money to Bank of America. And Bank of America at the time had been bragging about how they didn't receive a bailout. And so you should bank with them. 50% of all depositors are with Bank of America in the United States. And they gobbled up Countrywide, who did get a bailout, and they were gobbling up their competition. They got Merrill Lynch, etc. But while other people are on the cusp and falling apart in this desperate situation, Bank of America has been propped up by secretive bailout from the Federal Reserve, and they're using this Federal Reserve money to buy up competition and gather up a tighter monopoly. So the Fed is the problem. The Fed is the problem. Our government's the problem. And big corporations are a problem too. But the way to fix this problem is to have sound money and free markets, not a larger government and even more inflation from the Federal Reserve. So these protesters, they've got the right to be angry at Wall Street and the government, but their solution, some of them, not all of them are like this, but the commie types that out there that think we need more government regulations and more government. That's the problem. The SEC wasn't doing its job. Government regulations don't work because the corporations that are lobbying the government are often writing the laws and regulations themselves, and they only enforce them on the middle class to prevent competitive business from ever rising, whereas for their own, they cake their own loopholes, and hardly any of them are paying taxes. Some are even joined with the government itself, like Citigroup or GM or General Motors. It's a mess, but explaining it to these people is like talking to the wall. They've never had economics in their life, and they don't care. It's just sort of a leftist ideology just to kind of hate rich people and just kind of blame like the man or they or big companies or something. That we need big companies, but we need them to compete with each other on a free market. And the anger needs to be at Obama and at this Congress rolling over. Both parties, all of them. Basically every member of Congress, aside from a handful. We've been completely sold out.
We were sold out, and these kids don't understand that, and that's one of the biggest problems. Is they need to they need to educate themselves about what the truth is. They need to stop just blaming Wall Street. You know, I said to them, "You think it's some day trader that did this?" And they're like, "Whoa!" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, their greed helped perpetuate it, but come on." That's a symptom of a much larger problem. Exactly, that's a symptom of a much larger problem. Who prints the money out of thin air?
If the government didn't have the power to give away your money like that, then they wouldn't be able to take it. You know?
Exactly. If the Fed couldn't print money out of thin air and just pull money out of their ass and then say, "Hey, look, you know, how much would it take to shut you up?" Pfft, you'd have to give me $100 million, and then they snap their fingers and there's $100 million in cash. Well, actually, it wouldn't even be in cash. It would be in digital currency. Just, we'll put it in a bank account for you. We'll put it in this account. It's always amazing that people don't.
Well, the government has removed risk from the equation. Normally, if you do what these banksters did, where first they merge investment banks and deposit banks, and they sell mortgages to investment banks who package them all together. They call them CDOs, although there is no collateral involved, so I don't know why that's in the name, but they call them CDOs, and package all these subprime mortgages together, which is another misnomer because they're way below prime. These are like sub nothing at all. They have no paper, no collateral. The person might not even have a job or anything, but they give them a loan anyway because they don't care because there's no risk. The bank has passed it off to the investment bank, so your mortgage payment's now going to the investment bank, so they don't care if you pay it back or not. So they have no incentive to research or check to see if you have good credit or you're a good purchaser or not. They just say, well, I'm just going to sell as many loans as I can to people, because if they don't pay it back, that's not my burden. It's now the investment bank's burden. And the investment bank, of course, packaged them together and sold them to investors, but not before they lied about them. They went to the credit agencies and paid these people to lie, give AAA ratings to these CDO packages. And AAA is like a government bond. They have the collateral of the tax money. So they gave these totally worthless CDOs AAA ratings, and investors looked at that, said okay, bought them, and then these same investment bankers went around and placed bets against the very same things they just sold. And then on top of that, we have the insurance on all the mess. They didn't have insurance, wasn't subject to state regulation because they categorized it as a credit default swap, where you have a multitude of people taking insurance all out on the same property or on the same mortgage or whatever they're betting on, which is a disaster because if one of them goes down, you have to pay all the parties at the same time. There's not going to be enough money. The whole thing was based on credit instead of capital because the majority of these subprime loans were to people who could never pay back their house. People were trying to buy a home and sell it, and then buy another house. I'll pay for loan one with loan number two. It's a giant Ponzi scheme, but the responsibility wasn't just on the buyers, the people who thought they could have a nice home. It's on the lender. On the old system, you have a responsibility as a bank. If you loan out a mortgage, it could take 20 or 30 years before that's paid back by the month. But they removed risk out of the whole equation, and at the very end of it, the investment banks should have failed. They got the credit agencies to lie. They got stuck with all these mortgages. They should have failed because what they were doing was they were engaged in fraud. But the government went and bailed them out. So they removed risk from the whole equation. The market would have axed them. Instead of having these $1 million bonuses and going out and blowing money on hookers and blow, they'd be out on the street looking for a job. And the institutions would have been replaced, but you have the corporate media out there. Every single talking head said the same catchphrase: too big to fail. They're too big to fail. Too big to fail. Too big to go to jail. Nonsense. Some of them did fall, but selectively. The government, they let Bear Stearns fall, but they're going to bail out their friends. It's complete nonsense.
Well,
it's
look what
like
they did
the
with
old
Lehman
oligarchy.
Brothers.
Yeah, with Lehman Brothers.
And that was one of the oldest investment banks there was.
Yep, and that was it. But they prop up their competition though. So it's just a way of fostering monopolies. And
It's like
Bank
Tony
of America and
Soprano.
Goldman Sachs are the worst.
It's like the Sopranos are
Sopranos.
running our the world. That's the way I equate it. I'm like, you got Tony doing one thing. Tony's one country. Uh, Paulie Walnuts is another country. All these morons come together, work together, but sometimes they piss each other off and somebody gets whacked, or you go after somebody, maybe you slap somebody in the head a little bit, rough them up, but collectively they're all working together as an organized crime family. And it's ridiculous because, these people have no morals. Seriously, actually, I think the Soprano Mafia family probably had more
Morals.
yeah, more morals than these people do. Look at Hillary Clinton. We came, we saw, he died. I'll tell you what. If ever,
More than die, they
if
tortured him,
yeah, they raped him with a knife and
sodomized
everything
him.
else. If
Yep.
if if evil, if there was ever an example of evil on this planet, it is Hillary Clinton. Okay, I think if you look up the word evil in the dictionaries, there's a picture of her smiling with
Next to
fangs.
Vince Foster's body.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but no, they didn't kill Vince
She's an
Foster.
evil woman.
Yes, she is. She's completely evil, and I wouldn't put it past her to try to run for president. And if she didn't try to run for president, remember she said she wants to run the World Bank too. She'd made a comment about that about six
Oh
months ago.
man, she might be. She could replace the worst person they ever had in there is probably Wolfowitz.
He's another turd.
Paul Wolfowitz. He's the scum of the earth. He's one of the main architects and liars for the Iraq War.
Yep. And I'm not.
But I mean, you look how bad their propaganda is getting now with this. I'm sure you heard the story about the used car salesman, alcoholic pothead, who met with a Mexican drug cartel leader who was actually FBI in a plot for the Iranians to assassinate the Saudi ambassador
It's laughable.
and attack the Israeli embassy. Yeah, right. I mean, that's so pathetic. Of course, Eric Holder and them are out there saying that he's in the middle of a scandal of drug and gun trades. And this is one of the same jerks involved with Oklahoma City bombing. He killed Jesse Trinity's brother in jail, tortured him to death. And, the guy is complete scum. But I mean, even their lies are getting sloppier and sloppier. That's the dumbest thing I've heard since the Litvinenko scandal. I don't know if you remember that. That was in the UK. We've got this guy that works for Russian oligarchs, Boris Berezovsky, and Chechen terrorists in Israel. He's got a triangle there. And he died of overexposure to polonium. And the story was, the KGB must have killed him with polonium poison because he was a critic of Putin. Right. Well, KGB's pretty nasty, but who the hell uses an $11 million radioactive poison to kill a guy rather than, I don't know, stabbing him in the heart or something or shooting him? Obviously, he had a botched smuggling operation. He OD'd on it. He's in contact with this stuff for too long. Only one country with unchecked nuclear arsenal out there that would have this junk was the Israelis, and we find it traces of it on the planes going back and forth to Israel and all over Boris Berezovsky's work and residence. But the hell with following where the evidence goes. They made up this large story, said it's conspiracy. Litvinenko was killed by the Russians who decided to kill him with polonium for who knows what reason. They never gave a good reason for that, but totally ridiculous. But I think the U.S. may have topped that with this used car salesman story, trying to assassinate the Saudi ambassador and blow up the Israeli embassies. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. It just happened to be an undercover FBI agent. And why would they hire Mexican drug cartels?
Same thing with this
At all.
wannabe Rys2sense attack. Did you see this? This militia?
No.
Oh, they arrested 4 guys, all veterans, or at least 2 of them are veterans. I think all 4 of them are vets, though. And they're in their 60s and 70s. And supposedly they were making ricin and they were going to drive around Atlanta. First, I think they were going to mail some of it, and then they were going to just randomly drive around Atlanta and open the windows and just randomly throw ricin out the windows. Because, that wouldn't affect them.
The majority of these stories are FBI entrapment cases.
Well, that's what it turns out.
fabrications.
Guess who's involved, Ryan? Guess what alphabet agency is directly involved? The FBI.
I don't know that.
And they were given what
doubt
they
it at
thought
all.
was ricin, but it wasn't ricin. It was just some inert, something. And of course it was an FBI involved. I don't know if I don't remember if the person was an undercover agent or if it was an asset.
They do a really good job of preventing their own terrorist attacks.
Yeah, look, we stopped a terror attack. We stopped a terrorist. We got him. Guys, you made him. You created him. You trained him. That's besides the point. But that would be like if you just made one of your agents not shoot somebody randomly. That's not really stopping terrorism. That's just, well, I
Well, they
guess
can't
in
they
a
can't
way it
find
is.
our own privateers the CIA trains.
I guess it is a
You
way.
know,
I guess it is kind of in a way, right? Right? Because I guess if you think about like, it's not a
we had
war
Al
on
Midahar and Al
terror.
Hazmi open. Go ahead.
It's not a war on terror.
I'm
It's
just
a war
saying.
of terror. So,
Yes. Right. What's the old privateer system? Um, we supported the Mujahideen and the Taliban, which had the Al Qaeda, supposedly Al Qaeda faction within each time. But we had Al Mihar and Al Hazmi openly living in the United States. And not only were they living with their real names in California, they were living with a Saudi GID agent on loan with the FBI. And this is reported, and it's like you didn't even read it. Somehow these reports, it went to the CIA and all the channels, and the upper brass pretended like they knew nothing about it, never saw it. And of course, they ended up becoming 9/11 hijackers slash patsies. But the majority of them are getting passports rubber stamped in Jeddah from our own CIA agents over there. It's nonsense. I mean, we are creating our own terror attacks, and they bust their own terror attacks. Oklahoma City was an inside job. 9/11 was in and outside. I hate saying just inside job as a label because it wasn't completely cut and dry like that, but certainly the 19 guys directed from a man in a cave conspiracy is complete nonsense. And then, of course, the anthrax attack were another inside job. And not Al Qaeda, not Iraq,
wait a
and
minute. You
not
mean Al
Bruce
Qaeda
Islands.
didn't have access to Fort Detrick?
No, but I'll tell you what's amazing is if you remember, in the very beginning, they did blame Al Qaeda for the anthrax until December of 2001. They thought it was Al Qaeda because the notes said "Death to America, Death to Israel." The culprits put their name on it. It said "Death to America and Death to Israel." Allah is great, and it had 9/11 on the top, so it would be associated with the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, and Pennsylvania. But as it turned out, and also they were mailed from the locations of the hijacker cells in Florida and New Jersey, are where the letters were sent from. So whoever actually sent it knew who those were before it was public knowledge. And then we have a couple pieces of propaganda come out. By the 18th, Gary Schmidt and the rest of the PNAC group had published papers in the Weekly Standard, which was by William Crystal's, is his faction. He's a co-founder of PNAC. So they put it out in their paper saying that Muhammad Atta had met with Iraqi agents in Prague, thus making a connection to Iraq and the ringleader for 9/11, the guy who conveniently had a list of everyone's names on it, you know? And then a little bit later, that lie was compounded on by the Israelis. And this goes through the papers, the London papers first, and then the New York Observer in the U.S. And they said, okay, not only did Iraqi senior officials meet with Muhammad Atta in Prague, they were also seen giving a vial of anthrax to him. Israeli security force witnessed the transfer. It's in the London Times. And so from that, we get Colin Powell holding up a vial of anthrax to the UN, and Judith Miller's lies about mobile weapons labs that could produce anthrax and blah, blah, blah. Yet the whole time, because that speech and her lies all came after December. In December, they knew, because they had genetically traced it, that the anthrax had come from within the U.S. and had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. So the question is, how did the Israelis witness a transfer of anthrax at a meeting in Prague between two parties that not only didn't have anthrax, but didn't even meet in Prague? There was no meeting in Prague. Muhammad Atta never met with Iraqi officials. Iraq didn't have anthrax, and neither did Atta. So it's lie upon lie upon lie, but they just get bigger and bigger and said, oh yeah, they got 18 trucks. And they knew it was 18 trucks because the British sold them 18 trucks. But they weren't for producing anthrax, they were for producing hydrogen balloons, and they knew that the whole time, but they went in and lied to the UN, because the official legal reason to invade Iraq was saying that they had weapons of mass destruction, thus breaking UN Resolution 1441, which had been placed on them after they lost the first Gulf War. But it turns out they weren't breaking UN Resolution 1441 because they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have the chemical weapons they were accused of. They didn't have anthrax or VX or sarin gas or any of it. It was all lies. But now 1 million, maybe 1.5 million people are dead, still there. We wasted over $3 trillion. Thank you, Israel.
Right, and we just gave them bunker busters.
Yeah, and we gave them F-35s earlier in the year. I mean, it's a war for Israel. People say it's a war for oil. They'll say it was a war for the euro. They'll say Saddam Hussein was going to break the petrodollar monopoly and blah, 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 blah. The thing is, when these neocons are writing about regime change, and when I say these neocons, I mean Wolfowitz and Libby and Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith, people who are in our government that got this war going. When they were writing this rhetoric, when Clinton got a letter from Wolfowitz saying they need a regime change in Iraq in 1998 or 97. They start writing these policy papers about regime change, and the verbatim lies about chemical weapon labs under the palaces, and that William Safire said later in 2002 had already been said back in 1998 by Schmidt and Kagan and the rest of them. The verbatim lies from these PNAC papers got used as propaganda, and this was being said back in 1997, 1998, and there was no euro back then. So Saddam wasn't thinking of switching to the euro and breaking the dollar. That had nothing to do with it. They've been pushing for regime change for 3 presidents. Actually, even back in 92, they were pushing for it. After the Gulf War ended and George Bush Sr. didn't finish the job, as they say, and take Saddam out, they were already pushing for it and looking for excuses. And they had the weapons inspectors go in there, and Scott Ritter was the chief weapons inspector, but he came back and said, they don't have anything, you know, like we've forced them to get rid of everything. Then they tried the no-fly zone excuse. When Clinton was under the duress of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, he'd been impeached, but he hadn't been confirmed in the Senate yet. He started bombing Iraq. And after he started bombing Iraq, he passed through. He didn't get impeached completely. And hours after the verdict was in, he ended the bombings. So they blackmailed him in there to bombing Baghdad. Bush started bombing Iraq 27 days after he was in office. He and Tony Blair, over the no-fly zone excuse again, blew up some radar and so on. So they were looking for a pretext. After 9/11, it was easy to do, and they finally got in there and they got their war not only in Iraq but Afghanistan as well, which is another story. And that was previously set up before 9/11 as well. So it wasn't about the euro, because they started pushing for this war and using this verbatim propaganda before the euro even existed. And it wasn't about oil, because we didn't get the damn oil. We didn't get regime change. It's about what PNAC said it was about. Not only is it better for Israel, but for the U.S., what the U.S. gets out of it is their main goal is to, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they feel like as the sole superpower, we have to prevent any economic or military rival from arising to challenge us. And they got the second largest oil reserves and positioned themselves squat in the middle of the Middle East. They're on both sides of Iran, which is a competitor for the oil in the Caspian Sea. But the oil isn't important in so far as, oh, we're going to sell oil and make money. It's controlling the pipelines controls Central Asia. These are piss poor nations, and they got 1 or 2 resources, natural gas or oil, and when you control the pipeline, you control the policies in the whole region. And those lands are used for illegal purposes, for black market weapons sales, and of course, drugs, heroin being the big one. And it goes through the Golden Crescent. This is the same reason we went into Vietnam. I mean, it's not to stop communism. It's about opium. It's about drug trades. We've had opium wars for centuries.
Communism is a red herring.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so is terrorism.
Yeah, any ism. That's anytime you hear ism, it's always a new ist, too, that you have to be afraid of.
Does anybody think we invaded Grenada because they were a threat to the United States or becoming communist? I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's all about drugs and money. and
Yep.
control.
And drug money allows off the books the shadow economy. Places like Azerbaijan, it's a good almost 49% of their economy or so is the shadow economy from drug trade.
The UN came out with numbers a couple of years ago, and it was something like 3 or 400 billion dollars in cash is what the worldwide drug industry does in like the course of a year in
Well, see, the thing
transactions.
is, it's not just the sale of the drugs themselves. It's larger than that because the war on drugs, the drug trade itself makes plenty of money, of course, but it ties into the whole prison system, which is a business as well, and the policing system, and it also is what allows all these tribal leaders and stuff the revenue to purchase these weapons, black market weapon sales. They love to sell small arms to everybody and get factions fighting with one another because this feeds into the military-industrial complex. Perpetual war is perpetual profit, and the way to prop up these puppets is to allow them enough revenue, enough small arms to have, long-lasting, low-level conflict for infinity. That's what they love. Just have the Sunnis and Shiites and Kurds and whoever, depending on the region, in the Balkans, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, wherever you have them fighting. Uh, Israel and Palestine, Pakistan and India over Kashmir. The longer you can promote religious fanaticism, drugs, a low sale of small arms, then you're going to have conflict indefinitely. And so the businesses that are tied into the drug industry are the prison industry, weapons industry, and the whole military-industrial complex. And of course, we've used the drug war as a pretext to invade places like Panama and in other areas in Central America, saying, "Oh, he's a drug dealer." That was the replacement for communism. If communism would work, just say it's drugs. So it's a pretext for war, and it feeds into this whole weapon prison industry. And it also allows for off-the-book operations like CIA loves to do for the secret prison systems and the torture and the rest of the nonsense they do. They've got torture cells everywhere from Romania to Somalia. They've got these dungeons. It's disgusting. They're more than amoral, they're immoral. I mean, there's something psychotic about a person to want to torture someone else because it doesn't give you any valid information. They just tell you whatever they think you want to hear
And
to
they
make
know
you stop
that.
torturing them. Yeah, and they don't care.
Yeah, they know that.
It's a paycheck. I mean, they get off on it.
Well, I've talked with a friend of mine. He's another radio host. His name's Mark Passio, and I've done a couple shows with him about this. And we've discussed, how the mind of these psychopaths work. And a lot of times they recruit into their ranks people that have the very same tendencies. And then they nurture those tendencies and help them, they create them. Many of the most famous serial killers of the day were attached to government projects in one way or another.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Sirhan. When they found him, he had Albert DeSalvo's name in a book, in a notebook. Now, how did Sirhan, who was nowhere near Boston, meet the Boston Strangler and know who Albert DeSalvo was? How did he know who he was? Interesting.
That guy was a patsy. He's probably drugged out of his mind. He may have even been MK Ultra, but I mean, who knows? But the fact that they blamed the death of Robert Kennedy on a Palestinian lets you know who really did it.
Oh, of course. And then the flimsy excuse was that he was angry about him selling bombers to Israel, which is BS. And I've actually researched Bobby Kennedy's assassination, and he was totally killed by an
Cop
inside.
killed him same as his brother.
Oh yeah, in fact, one of the security guards, whose name is Thane Eugene Caesar, they never even questioned this guy. And once you look into it, this guy totally did it because he's the only other person that was seen firing a weapon. And if he didn't hit Bobby, then he, at the very least, provided a secondary distraction for somebody to cap him, because the kill shot came from like an inch behind his head, and Sirhan was in the front of him. So, and then when you find out that Sirhan was uh, hypnotizing himself with instructions he got from the Rosicrucians, because he had joined the Rosicrucian order.
He was
And
obsessed with hypnotism.
yeah, and then in
That's
his in
that's how
his
that's one thing these prisons provide, though, is most of the time hypnotism and drug and mind control and torture is just not going to do anything except break a person down into regression. But now and then you find people who are really susceptible, and you can use them for weird stuff like that.
Well, yeah, that's how they came. That's how they come about with the Manchurian candidates and all that stuff, and that's pretty much what the evidence points to in his case. That's why it's interesting that DeSalvo's name was written down in his notebook when they found it.
The physical evidence of the number of shots fired, the fact that he was hit in the back of the head from point blank, and
Oh, of course.
I mean, I got a movie on the Kennedys coming out here in a couple weeks, actually. It's more on JFK, but I did get into RFK too. But you'll like that. If you liked War by Deception, and if you liked More Than Taboo, then you'll like my movie on the Kennedys. It took me a long time because there's a lot of BS out there on the Kennedy assassinations.
That thing is so deep. It's just like 9/11. People try to make it this black and white issue, and it's like, no, dude, you can't do that, because you'll never be able to understand it as a whole of how they were. Because if you try to look at like a black and white issue, you're gonna run into things that don't make sense, and you're gonna say, I don't understand how this worked or that worked. But if you understand that there was more than just the Israelis involved, or more than just the CIA involved, there was, I mean, Jordanian intelligence, the ISI. It was a collective effort. So obviously somebody higher up was collectively running these things. And if you trace back through history where all these intelligence agencies come from, they all stemmed from these elite families, these rich elites that are better known as the black nobility, going back hundreds of years to even the Queen of Spain and all them. They had their own intelligence guys. They had their own people that did that. They went out and spied on people. They had their own little secret police, kind of forces. They've always had that. So that stuff just evolved into what we have today with these intelligence agencies. Most people don't even realize the CIA is a private corporation. It has nothing to do with the United States government. They think it's a government agency. If you go look at the CIA's charter, it tells you that they're a corporation. They do work, intelligence services, on the behest, or at the behest and on the behalf of the United States government. But then if you understand that the United States isn't even what the country we live in the USA, United States of America. The United States is the friggin' corporation they made back in the 1800s. That's why the military is the United States military. It's not the United States of America military or the American military. It's referred to in slang term as the American military, but it's the U.S. military. Every time the press talks about it, the U.S. military, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Navy. They never say the Navy of the USA or the USA Navy. And everybody's like, well, maybe it sounds too long or too weird. Well, no, if you said it long enough, and a few times, it wouldn't sound weird to you. It only sounds weird because you're programmed to say U.S. Well, why is that? Because when you look up the United States, you find out that it's a freaking corporation. But people are, this is how deep it goes. Dude, there's so much. You have to understand that it goes deep. You have to be willing to open your mind, I think, to be able to really wrap your head around 9/11. And people,
it's pretty clear 9/11 has cover-ups when people were caught with bombs in trucks on 9/11.
I can tell you firsthand, dude. I was a firefighter in Jersey, and I was in the command center in Giant Stadium with the New Jersey State Police. And I said this before. We heard, it was me and a few other people, and I was standing right by the radios listening to what was going on, and we heard them arrest, not the guys that got arrested for videotaping. We heard them arrest the van full of Israelis that had just come over the George Washington Bridge. They arrested them on Route 80 right after it turned into Route 95, or right where it splits it, because when you come over the GWB, it's Route 95, and then you can either go north or south, and then there's Route 80 west. And they were right there, and that's where they got pulled over by the New Jersey State Police, we heard the whole thing. And first it said we have a van full of Middle Eastern men with explosives in it. And we were like, holy crap. And then it came back a couple minutes later and that they were Israelis. And I was like, what? Why would the Israelis be? I was a little, huh? And
Yeah.
I've said this story hundreds of times, and people were like, I've had people tell me, typical, yeah, you're making that up, Popeye, you're lying. Well, I found the video clip. There's multiple news reports not from the big, I think there was one on Fox, but mainly from the local stations around New York and New Jersey. Not the huge national Fox News, but like the local Fox affiliate or local CBS affiliate.
Yeah, it was on CBS. It was on ABC.
Yeah, that's what it was. And the guy was like, "There's one," and they're all at night. It's like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and they're like, "Yes, there's evidence. They had a van full of explosives. They're Middle Eastern men. Blah 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 blah." And that was it. It was the last time you ever heard of it. But at least there's that video evidence to back up my story. Because
Bernard Kerik was bragging about the arrest, and it was in multiple newspapers. It was in the Jerusalem Post. It was on Fox. It was on CNN. It was all over the place. But by 9/12, 9/13, you didn't hear about it anymore, and you didn't hear about the dancing Israelis either. Fox did do a piece on it, but it never got airtime. It was only on their website, and that got expunged, but it got recorded before they removed it. But what I found interesting is that the FBI was doing an investigation into antiwar.com because the editor there, Justin Raimondo, did some reports back in the day on Dominic Suter, who was the owner of Urban Moving Systems, who was ended up being a front for the Mossad. A couple of these guys were Mossad agents that they know of. And, the cops went there with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and they confiscated over a dozen computer hard drives. And this guy and his wife fled back to Israel, and they're not going to extradite him or anything. But that Raimondo put the story out and had the guy's name out. I ended up getting his picture, his bank records, and everything in my film. But the FBI has an investigation, and antiwar.com is saying they might be working for a foreign entity. What? Because the transcripts, we found them in Italian and Polish, but of the FBI suspect list had Dominic Suter on there as a 9/11 suspect, and that quickly got changed. He's no longer on the English version. But what we provided to foreign intelligence agencies was about these Israelis. And we got hold of that, and the FBI is, rather than looking into the guy caught owning and fleeing the country for a front company for an intelligence agency with a history of attacking the United States, with people busted with bombs and people busted filming the first plane hitting and lying about their whereabouts and having traces of explosives found in their van.
Not to mention the USS Liberty.
Yeah, well, I can list tons of them.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not like there's not enough evidence to say that they've done this before, so it's not like it would be out of the ordinary to say it.
Oh yeah, Operation Susanna, it's constant. It's constant. Just that year, even AIPAC got caught spying on the United States and selling secrets to Israel. Just that year. That was out of Douglas Feist's office, the same office of special plans that generated the majority of the lies for the Iraq War. You've got
even Fox News was talking about how they were rounding up the massive Israeli spy ring that was here in the States, and they even admitted that it was bigger.
That was another spy ring. That was a different
the Soviets
spy ring
ever had. The Soviets
it was the largest ever. 200 busted in this massive spy ring. We've got there's three things going on. We've got Converse and Amdoc spying on phones. You had AIPAC spying on the Defense Department, and then you got these guys in the ecstasy trade who are doing this massive operation looking into the DEA and military institutions and stuff, selling artwork, supposedly, the Israeli art students. All this going on. They're living next door to the hijacker cell in Florida. I wouldn't say they're living next door. I think they're just living together, but they're shielding these patsies because embedded within these cells, we've got legitimate privateer patsies who are in the U.S. from Al-Qaeda. All right, but Al-Qaeda isn't what you think it is either, but just for now, we'll call them that. But within these cells, the leadership of these cells are Mossad. Saying who do know what's going on and know, all right, get this guy to this place, create a paper trail because they have to go to these flight schools and stuff. But that's not what's going to go down on 9/11 at all. Doesn't even matter if they're on the plane or not. So they're going to guide those in. They can't risk a miss. I mean, they hit both World Trade Centers, which are barely wider than a plane, and they hit them.
You can see the one plane auto adjusts itself right at the last minute before it hits the tower, kind of like it banks a little bit. And that the only thing that would do that would be a computer at the last minute making last minute adjustments as it's bringing in, kind of like a cruise missile.
Well, I mean those were hard. The Pentagon was a hard enough shot, but hitting the World Trade Center was even harder because I mean, it's no larger than a plane.
It's like threading a needle, and the piece of thread being the plane, and the needle being the eye of the needle being the tower. It's not easy. And these guys couldn't fly a Cessna, dude. I mean,
no, these guys they just all their whole role was just show up and get on the plane.
Actors. That's all they were.
Just they probably told them they were doing something or part of a drill, or who knows what they told them. They may have actually thought they were hijacking an airplane.
Well, look at the evidence with the 7/7 bombings, where people said that when the one guy on the Hackney bus, he realized that that they were really explosions. He started freaking out, and he took his backpack off, and then right after that is when his backpack detonated. But it was like if he was gonna, or when quote unquote the bomb detonated, and all the evidence points that there was something under the train because the metal was blowing up and into the train car. It's just people don't use their heads. It's like, dude, look at the explosion. Oh, but don't pay any attention to science. Don't pay any attention to fact. The only thing you need to worry about it is it was the bad Muslims that did it. We need
Oklahoma
to
City,
their country.
They found bombs in the building after the fertilizer truck bomb.
They were bigger. They're
finding bombs in the building. They're finding them and reporting them on TV. And
they even said they were bigger than the truck bomb. Obviously.
Well, yeah. Well, Strassmeyer was there on film. They confiscated all those things, and blows my mind. This is the same as 7/7 too, but each camera that the Ryder truck passed that morning all went out exactly whenever the truck would have been in view. Simultaneously, they each all like getting their tapes changed or whatever, just as the truck's going by.
Well, that happens all the time. Did you notice that every time there's something that goes on with the government, the Gabrielle Gifford shooting, there's over 700 videos of that event, and not one of them has been released to the public. And they say, oh, well, it's to protect her privacy. She's a public official that got shot, supposedly, publicly. Why would you not
Well, the Pentagon's a good example, too. They confiscate all the tapes, and the section of the Pentagon that was hit was where the investigation was going into $2.3 trillion.
Tell them all to show up there that morning, for a meeting, and make sure you bring all the evidence. And they're all there, and then that's the spot that the plane hits. And
he's like, "Oh, this is missing. We're gonna settle this tomorrow."
And where was Rumsfeld? He was out on the lawn, running around, helping people. I was helping rescue people, and people were like, "Oh, Rumsfeld, he's such a nice old man."
Before that, they couldn't find him though.
People, I tell people, yeah, right. I'm like, dude, he should be charged with criminal negligence at the very least, and what in the military they would charge you with would be dereliction of duty, and that's what he should be charged with. When it hits the fan, he's supposed to be in charge. He's the Secretary of Defense. That's the same thing when you research
and they hit your building. Yeah, exactly. Not just America. They hit your building.
When you research the Bay of Pigs, it's the same thing though. Alan Dulles was in charge of that operation. Kennedy had given the go-ahead a couple days before and signed off on it and said, go ahead. Just like it came out that Obama gave the go-ahead to quote-unquote kill bin Laden a couple days before. You notice he didn't give it, and within like 6 hours they had his head on a pike. He gave it like on a Thursday or a Friday, and then they got him supposedly on Sunday. Well, that's how in the real world. Even
you got to see my video about I killed Bigfoot.
Yeah, well, I think
I didn't take any photos. I buried his body at sea, but I killed him. Trust me.
I think that whole thing is fake. But
Oh, the Nosama thing was terrible.
oh yeah, it
I mean,
was
that got
horrible.
debunked right away.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, dude, even like 5-year-old kids were debunking it. I mean,
That was like babies on incubators, stupid.
did you wait? Here's a good point. This is what I said about it. They had that party outside the White House, and we were watching this live, right? Me, Bob Tuskin, Payday Monsanto, and a few other people, and we're all watching this happen, right? And
How about the live feed that didn't happen?
well, we're watching this, right? And I'm like, I said, you guys not see something? And they're like, what? I'm like, where the frig is the Secret Service Uniform Division? And they're like, huh? So you know all those uniform guys that look like cops that run out and beat the crap out of protesters when they're like 50 feet from the fence? They're like, yeah. I said, well, look, those are uniform division guys. They wear a uniform, but they're still Secret Service. Where are they? There's not one person out on that lawn, and there's people grabbing the fence with their hands. So there's people in the trees, literally over the fence. How the hell is the Secret Service not out there freaking out? Because how do they know that that guy's not a threat unless this is all staged? Well, you come to find out that all those kids were from Georgetown University. They got bussed in because there was some event at Georgetown that night, and it was right after the event got out. They all brought them. They brought them all down, and wherever they filmed it, whether it was at the White House or in some movie lot, or some random lot somewhere with cameras just conveniently set up, aiming at the fence, and these kids were all running around, and they start to light off Roman candles, and I said, "How the hell are they lighting off Roman candles?" And everybody's like, "Yeah, I guess that's a good point." I'm like, "It is a good point. Think about it. This is one of the most important things that you can focus on to show that it's BS. If you were anti-war protesters or anti-drone or 9/11 truth or
Where
what,
do you buy fireworks?
you
Just
know, first
on the
of all,
local store there or something? Is there
yeah,
something close by? I don't know.
exactly. DC, it's not easy to get fireworks. That's a good point too. Okay, and you never see that at any of these anti-war protests. You never see fireworks or anything to that extent. And yet they get within 50 feet of that fence, they're getting the crap kicked out of them. People handcuff themselves to the fence, and they get arrested and they get tased and beaten and maced and everything else. But these kids are literally grabbing the fence like monkeys, letting off Roman candles, and in the tree, one of the trees that overhangs the fence, and there's nobody there. There's nobody worried. There's nobody saying, wow, we got to, these kids could get out of control because they're teenagers. You don't think that the Secret Service would think about that or worry about that? And there's not one guy out there keeping an eye on this. So, of course, it's got to be fake because there's no way in hell that would happen in real life. When you
Well,
see
how
real
about
life
you
protests,
just reminded me of this is a separate thing, but George Bush, after the second plane had hit, and they knew very clearly, all right, the nation's under a terrorist attack. Bush is sitting in a publicly announced location in an elementary school, and he just sits there. The Secret Service didn't rush him out or anything. He just sits there for several minutes, thinking, well, is they hit the Pentagon yet, or whatever. Like he just sat there and did nothing.
point,
And
because then
they
he's
should
putting
have
those
rushed him
kids
out
at
of there.
risk. Because
Yeah,
not
and
only
himself.
not only is he putting himself at risk as the president, but he's in, like you said, he's in a publicly disclosed spot where everybody, his itinerary had been, released for a couple of days. So if they were gonna hit, you would think they would want to fly the plane into the non-air defended, uh,
Or just walk in and shoot him. I mean,
well,
they knew where he is.
did you know that the night before, the hotels and stuff that they were staying in, they had uh, anti-aircraft defenses put up on the roof, portable anti-aircraft defenses put up on the roofs of the hotels and stuff.
Nope, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, but why were they worried about anti-aircraft stuff if you couldn't have ever thought about airplanes being hijacked? Oh, maybe you were worried about one of your toys going awry, huh? Because that's what I call their little actors. I'm convinced that these guys, at least a few of them, were somewhat under. Well, they were all under some form of mind control, whether it was through just lying or spiking them with drugs. But a lot
Or
of
giving
them,
him $100,000.
exactly, a lot of them though were big on drugs and stuff. So that makes people way more susceptible to mind control and a lot of these techniques because that's what they used. I've researched MK Ultra and then gone even deeper, and I've read Kathy O'Brien's accounts, Bryce Taylor. It's amazing the level of mind control they use. I mean, it's electronic. NASA has a big hand in a lot of that stuff with the electronic forms of mind control. Even von Braun had talked about it and made mention of it. You know,
it's much easier just to pay somebody a lot of money and lie to them and don't tell them
that happens too. But a lot of times, some of these people, I believe at least a few of them were somewhat controlled through whether it be drugs or some sort of mild mind control. Many of them I were just stupid. I mean, they find general useful idiots. I mean, look at all these people that it doesn't.
That was certainly the case in the underwear bomber.
Well, case in point, exactly. That's where I was going with this. Look at the case of the people that they like, Abdu Muttalib. This guy couldn't tie his friggin' shoes, okay, and yet he's some master bomber that made that. Come on. That's like telling me that crack wasn't invented by the CIA and by a white guy when I know it was. Okay. I forget the guy's name. He eventually he came out and it was traced back to him, whatever the chemist that came up with it. But I say to people, do you really think some black crackhead or before crack?
When Ricky Ross?
Yeah, like you think some? Yeah, like even Freeway Ricky Ross said that the government supplied him, and that's Hey, look at Snoop.
Oh, yeah,
Snoop admits that he was a drug dealer when he was younger, and he's come out and said, "Look, man, none of us even asked where it came from. It just appeared." Well, of course it just appeared, because they couldn't get cocaine into the ghetto, because nobody could afford it. It was a rich white man's drug. So what did they do?
Well, rich person's drug, yeah.
Well, you
mix it with baking soda.
It was. I know it was you could say it was a rich person's drug, but I'm saying back then that was the stigma that cocaine had. So they wanted to get it involved, and I mean now coke's everywhere.
It's like saying pots for hippies or something.
Exactly. Yeah, they wanted to. They wanted to back to, in the 80s and even in the 70s. Drugs. It's amazing how the stigma that, and it's still to this day. I mean, now there's a little more compassion if you look at somebody who is really truly addicted to something, which you should feel a little bit compassion for them, because you have to realize they are a victim in it, really. Even if they're idiots and they keep going back to it, at the base level, they're a victim. The person you really should be mad at is that went and imported the drugs, the CIA. You should be mad at the people like Bill Clinton, Mena, Arkansas. Be mad at those guys. I mean, Barry Seal. This guy, this guy, you don't think he was hit. They were like, oh, well, he was hit by the drug cartels. Right. He was hit by the drug cartels. He was hit because he knew too much and he had to go. And that's what happens to these people.
Gary Webb shot in the head twice.
Yeah, he found out too much stuff and then he gets shot in the head twice with a shotgun. But hey, he was suicidal, Ryan. I mean, the guy felt bad, so he shot himself in the head twice with a shotgun. And it was a pump shotgun. So he shot himself and then went, oh, that wasn't good enough. Because you normally have that kind of cognitive function after you've shot yourself once in the head with a shotgun. I mean, people need to use a little bit of common sense. If you look at these government stories over and over again, whether it's 9/11, Oklahoma City, and I'm glad you brought that up because Oklahoma City is a big one. When you look into that, there's so much stuff. I think
if the web had been around then at the degree it is now, that myth would have popped a lot faster. But I guess people just forgot about it, or I don't know. But
it's kind of like
it's really not hard.
You ever notice that?
What's that?
It's like the forgotten terror event.
Yeah, so is with the DC snipers. They're like, well, there hasn't been another terrorist attack. I'm like, DC snipers, you couldn't catch them at all because that threw them for a loop. They didn't know who it was. These people went around and they shot all these people in Maryland, Virginia, and
you notice they executed that guy real fast.
Yeah,
like some people sit on. It's amazing. McVeigh too. You'll have death row. People will be sitting on death row for 30 years waiting. Appeals, and there's a backup, and the state they only kill 1 or 2 people a year, so you gotta wait. Blah 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 blah. and yet you get someone like McVeigh, and they're like, well, we got to fast track this one, get him to the head of the line. Well, why? What makes him worse than anybody else there? If he really did it, what
Start
makes
talking to
him
too
worse?
many people in jail.
Exactly. He opened his mouth and said, "Yo, there's some stuff you guys don't know about." Blah, 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 blah.
That guy was such a loser. Like, he wanted credit for it because he was. I mean, he was in the truck and everything, so he was guilty. But he was like, "Yeah, it was all me." You know, the guy had no idea
John
what was
Doe
going
number
on.
two. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just like that.
Strasmeyer. Well, he was on loan from the CIA, and that's the thing that makes that a bigger case. Is that that key thing right there? Not only we know the FBI is involved, but that brings the CIA into the whole mess, and that's why that's why there was a John Doe number two. Then what John Doe? It was all McVeigh by himself, and we don't have cameras anymore. And forget about the sketches and the witnesses and all that. Just it was all McVeigh. Shut up, because the German guy makes him he was a foreign agent, a CIA asset. So that makes it beyond the FBI. So they definitely had to get rid of him. So all traces of Strassmeyer are gone in that case. And they just said McVeigh did it, and a fertilizer bomb made 2 crescent-shaped holes, and the hell with the bombs they found in the building. They just ignore that. I mean, they don't even have good lies. But the thing they do is the mass media is controlled. So if you don't bring it up, it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, nobody ever questions that. Like, that's one of the biggest things.
It's like Building 7 or something.
It's just not there. People are like, what bombs?
Before it fell down. I mean, come on. That's terrible.
What bombs? I'm like, what do
Yeah,
you mean,
what are
what
you talking
bombs? They
about?
found multiple bombs. Go look, there's news reports. And they see the news reports, and they're like, oh my God.
The basements of both World Trade Centers were blown out before either one of them fell. You know, it's not like a plane that hit 90 floors above blew out the lobby simultaneously, but the lobbies were blown out because of the
Did you
bombs.
hear their new theory? Remember, there were never any explosions. That was their original theory, that there was never explosions. It was just over-pressurization because of the floors coming down. And then when the pancake theory disappeared, they never had anything else to explain for the explosions, so they ignored them. There is no evidence for explosions. We didn't find any explosives. We didn't test for it. Well, yeah, that's true, but we didn't see a need to because there was no evidence for explosions. Okay, fast forward years now. There's so much overwhelming evidence. Video, eyewitness testimony, audio.
Seismic, yeah.
Yeah, seismic. They have no choice but to address it. So now their theory, they admit that, in fact, let me see. I'll read you the opening thing here. Explosions triggered by molten aircraft metal reacting with water from sprinkler systems may have felled the Twin Towers after the 9/11 attacks, according to a new theory. Just before the 2 World Trade Center skyscrapers in New York collapsed on September 11th, 2001, powerful blasts were heard within the buildings, and a leading materials scientist says they could be the key to the dramatic conclusion of the terrorist attacks. So now they have no choice but to admit that there were explosions, but they're saying it was molten aircraft aluminum reacting with water. reacting with water.
I mean, I just want to say, did you watch the towers come down? Because they're not falling down. They were blown apart.
They were demolished. They were pulverized.
They're pieces, they're chunks of steel and concrete flying sideways into other buildings and being embedded. I mean, they're blown up. That wasn't slowly, cut in half with thermite or water and aluminum mixing together. These were blown to pieces.
Yeah, no.
The basement was taken out.
It was used, I believe that thermite was used to cut the beams, but I don't think that's the only thing that they needed the thermite to cut through those thick beams, without a doubt. But it was a combination of explosives, has to be. And I say
RDX or C4 or any number of things.
Yeah, I say look into even to the barometric bomb, because people, if anybody knows who Michael Riconosciuto is, if you look, there's a great movie that was put together back in the 90s about the OKC bombing. And it's not very well known. Researchers know about it. Some people know about it. I try to give out as many copies, actually, of the movie on DVD as I can. It's called Murder in the Heartland. And when you watch the movie, the guy who put it together, he was able to get with Ted Gunderson because Ted knows Michael Riconosciuto. Well, he knew him. Ted's dead now, but he went over to he took him over to the prison where Michael Riconosciuto was, and Riconosciuto said that he would only get interviewed, I guess, if Gunderson was there. So this guy was interviewing him, and he was talking how he was working on a barometric bomb for the CIA. And the way it worked pretty much is this bomb, it was like a canister, and you would put it, you could strap it to a beam or put it near the base on the floor next to a beam, and basically it would release this gas, and this gas would it was created, it was obviously man-made, and it would hang like low level. It wouldn't dissipate. It would hang around, pretty much where it was, kind of like smoke, and it would, it would gather all the way around the beam, all sides of it, every piece, because it's all over the place. And then after a certain amount of time, a trigger would go off, which it would cause a chemical reaction in this gaseous cloud, and the cloud would detonate instantaneously. But because of how the cloud was wrapped around everything, the force would literally have the brisance, the shattering power that's needed to literally turn steel into dust, which is what happened on 9/11, because all that dust, there was pieces of steel in there, concrete, phones, floor, mercury from the lights. I mean, everything was turned into dust. People have this thing that there was this huge pile of crap. There was, because there was 110 stories tall. There would have been a larger pile of crap if it just collapsed on itself. There was such a small pile because everything had literally turned to dust. I mean, they were finding firefighters where the bodies were gone, but the clothes were still there, because some of the clothes are meant to withstand a couple thousand degrees, protect you from fire and burning, and certain parts of like the oxygen masks and stuff wouldn't last to that temperature, but some of the clothing would. And they were literally finding firefighters with the bunker gear and the coats and the pants, and the person was gone. There was no trace of the human being, but obviously there was probably some smears on the inside, but there was, the physical, even, mostly fleshy lumps of people were gone, and people couldn't understand. And at first I was like, well, I guess there was a lot of pressure when it came down, but we kept trying to figure out, and we figured they must have put explosives in the building. I mean, it was within days afterwards, there was a lot of talk about, they had to have put explosives in the building, because you would need that energy to make people disappear like that, because that's what happened. And this barometric bomb that Riconosciuto was talking about does exactly that. Now, I don't think it was just that. I think if they did use it, it was that, probably coupled with, RDX, C4, thermite to cut the beams, because they would need something that could work fast and get through the beams. They know that from...
The problem with thermite is timing to get it to go pop, pop, pop like that. Thermite's pretty... unless they have some new method. They may have had new methods, because I know Kroll was working on something, but it's hard, pretty high risk there with that, to go one right after the other, because it's pretty unpredictable how it's going to burn. I mean, you're lighting on iron oxide and aluminum, and you usually take magnesium or something with really high specific heat to get that to even start. You need a cutter charge to start that, and then that to burn through the metal. But to get them to do it evenly would be extremely difficult.
Well, Controlled Demo Inc. showed how they have these strips that they wrap around the beams at 45-degree angles, and
it completely cut through a beam. But to know that, okay, this one will go first, this one will go second, this one will go third.
Well, they have. That's why it had to be someone like Controlled Demo Inc. Somebody had to have been involved that knew what they. You don't have. There's only a few people in the United States that have the ability and the knowledge to bring a building down like that. And I've had people tell me, look, Popeye, it didn't come down into its own footprint. There was stuff that was thrown out to the sides, and I say, look, yes, there was horizontal ejections, there was a pile, it covered a decent-sized area.
But not a Building 7, that went straight down.
Yeah, but everything pretty much landed in this neat pile, in the entire World Trade Center complex area. So it didn't fall laterally, which it should have. There shouldn't have been a symmetrical collapse. It should have been asymmetric. That building shouldn't have fallen laterally, and it should have been, like in these movies where the comets take out a building and, half the skyscraper breaks off and falls down and lands in the streets. That's how it should have happened. It's exactly how it should have happened if it was going to happen like that. The building went through the path of most resistance. It's just ridiculous. And, again, this whole...
And the cores, you don't have to cut every floor. Someone's like, you do that. You only need it in like 4 places, one in the basement, a quarter of the way up, halfway up, and so on.
Explosives will do the rest when you turn everything else to dust.
The core in the middle was still there shortly after the building fell, and it fell.
You see it
a few seconds later. So, and you can see that it falls. It's cut there, and there. You
can see it goes
like 3 pieces fall.
It comes right down pretty much into its own little footprint.
But it breaks before it hits.
Oh yeah, you can see it. You can see that it was like bloop, bloop,
falling.
Kind of like in the movies when somebody gets cut up by a laser or something and they fall apart piece by piece. They stand there for a minute and then all of a sudden, bloop, bloop, bloop. That's the exact way it came down. You're right. It stood there and then all of a sudden it was just like piece broke off, and then just kind of collapsed on itself. What would make a solid steel structure do that? I know fire wouldn't, and I've said this as a firefighter.
Fire burns buildings; it doesn't blow them up.
Yeah, I was a firefighter for 6 years. Okay, I can tell you that if this really happened the way they're telling everybody it happened, then building codes would have been changed like that, and they haven't been changed. Not one building code has been changed since then. So you have to worry apparently about physics. The laws of physics just being suspended when there's certain conditions now, and people aren't worried about that and trying to build buildings to deal with that. Doesn't that reek of like red alert? Isn't there a flag going up? Like how come they haven't changed building code, Ryan?
Jet fuel is leaving molten steel in the basements, yet in the Pentagon it couldn't burn wooden desk and paper books and
but
things that burn at around 400
molten enough
degrees.
to melt the wings and the engines of the plane.
Of course.
But they found DNA.
Right.
Come on, really? There's multiple reports that they came out with, and they said this. Well, then there's this. Then there's this. So I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to debate whether there was a plane or there wasn't a plane. I'm saying the way that they covered it, obviously it's a cover.
I'm saying there's an airplane. I'm just saying that because there's no motive to use a missile or whatever, or bombs or whatever, and no evidence. Lack of evidence of a plane is not evidence for a missile.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the phone calls were faked?
What, phone calls from the airplane?
Yeah.
What, from Todd Brimmer and all?
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like it's just a stupid thing to lie about. Like, why even add that to the story? But it's so weird for a person to be like, hey, and announce their name and everything. That's really suspicious. But, like, I don't like to get into, like, Class C arguments or not. Like, that stuff to me doesn't matter because we have so much bigger evidence than that.
Yeah, that's the smaller... Well, I know what you mean. And a lot of times what they do is they try to drag people into that. And when I say they, I mean the mainstream media or the manipulators that come out and try to...
It seems like with Flight 93, why shoot it down, right? Why not just let it run into Building 7? Like, why would you shoot it down? That screws everything up.
I think what happened is, this is why I think...
Because the
passengers really did revolt
exactly
to some extent, and they realized, because obviously they had mics in the cabin and they were listening to what was going on, they probably heard them revolting and were like, if they land that plane, there's going to be witnesses, they're going to want to question these guys. And then we already knew they were being followed by F-16. See, they lied about that because all the local reports, again, like I was telling you,
right. Well, that's the thing. If they take back over the plane, right? And so what? It's remote. They can just send it where they want to anyway. The one thing they can't do though is the passengers pop open their cell phone and call someone. Then they're screwed. They say, "Hey, we're on a plane and it's going back to New York, and there's not even a pilot there," or we're trying to turn it around. It's not listening. Or
see, that's even worse. If it's just they realize, just like in the Lone Gunman, that the plane's being remotely controlled, and which people think that the technology for that doesn't exist, yet
Yeah, it's had forever.
they're willing to accept the fact that we fly drones from Nevada over in Pakistan and bomb people from little trailers in the Nevada desert. That's 5,000 to 6,000 miles away. So if they can do that, yeah, they can remotely fly a plane into a building. They
And you
could
just
use.
look into Britannia and Boeing and the Raytheon guys. Like that's all that stuff's in my movie. But the thing with the phone calls is like you got to have some calls. Like if some calls were made and say, we're planning on, taking this plane back from hijackers, some of them may have been legitimate up to a point, right? Because the person on the other end got those calls. Once they realize those calls are being made, they know they need to shoot the plane or blow it up, right? But the one they're going to focus on, and the Brimmer one was really suspicious, is he's talking to an FAA worker or something. Like, he didn't call his wife or anything like that. He's just like talking to the operator lady. That whole thing, I don't believe it. But
Well, it
other
was
calls,
tested. There were people like pilots who tested it. They took cell phones up at even a lower altitude than the reported altitude that the phone calls were made at from, and it was impossible at the time. And then a couple of years later,
well, they have the air phone, and it depends on the phone. I mean, like in 2001, cell phone really case by case. But had something got out, they got a cover story to say, yeah, well, that's what we said. They were planning to take over the plane. So if anyone had called and said that,
yeah, they just took advantage of it, and then oh, they took it over and they heroically crashed the plane. Why would they heroically crash the plane? Why wouldn't they be like, hey, let's take over the plane, and we're at 15, 20,000 feet. Let's just try to hold the stick straight. Okay, maybe find the autopilot button, turn autopilot on, and then call the tower and say, hey, how do we land this plane? And a lot of people don't realize the planes
I
pretty
think the
much land
story was
themselves.
the hijackers just crashed it rather than allowing them to completely take it over.
Do you want to talk about your movie a little bit?
You can talk about it. I'll just recommend people go see. It's at warbydeception.com now, so it's easy to go see that. And that goes all over 9/11 and the Iraq War and the anthrax are the main three things. But it touches a little bit on Iran-Contra and some prior conspiracies, a little bit of Oklahoma City, just to give you a flavor of, look, this has been going on and been happening, and a lot of the same players are involved. Um, and this isn't just a 9/11 film about like, Building 7 fell too fast or showing the explosives. This really gets into the neocon network and not only what didn't happen, but what actually happened. The Israeli role, the Pakistani role, the continuity of government in the U.S., all the intelligence agencies broke it down, hijacker by hijacker, traced it all out. It's 3 hours plus, but you don't have to watch it all in one sitting. But that's the most complete film. I didn't want to water it down, and I didn't want to say, oh, for the sake of time, I figured it's an important enough issue that you can watch 3 hours of it. If you can watch Gone with the Wind, you can watch something about a terrorist attack on your own country.
And you have a YouTube channel and a website. Go ahead and give out to the listeners where they can check out your website and YouTube channel and everything else.
YouTube is Rys2sense. The easiest way to find my website is just go to Google or whatever search engine and write anti-neocons, and it'll go to my site, Rys2sense.com. But anti-neocons was the original name for many years, and it's still on all the Google search engines. And I'm often on whatreallyhappened.com. I moderate that site. I'm one of the mods, and you'll see my work there too.
Awesome. And I want to say thank you for everything you do and the films that you make and what you do. Again, people, you don't have to 100% agree on things to be able to stand up with each other when someone gets screwed with. And Ryan got screwed with. His movie got taken off YouTube.
My account's been taken down. Like I said before, my AOL was removed. My MySpaces were removed.
You're like me. You've gone through the ringer with
yeah,
YouTube. How many accounts have you had closed down?
On YouTube, only 4, but that's because I just quit using them after like the third one. I said, the hell with it. And I finally, people pressured me like, please, can you do it again? Like, if they kick you off again, so what? But so I started using Vimeo and hosting my own films for a while. But when I was making War by Deception, I decided, okay, YouTube lifted its time limit thing, so I'll use them, but I was just kind of half-assedly using YouTube for safe videos. So if had I been going like my Holocaust movie got me suspended, but not didn't get me deleted yet. I had a couple red warnings. So if I said all the things I usually do, I would have been kicked off. So the only reason I'm safe on my fourth account is that I'm censoring myself. Like I give out some pretty good news on Rys2sense, but there's certain things you just can't say. But I'll make a video saying here is a link to another video that I did, and I'll just use my YouTube to link to Vimeo or some other site. So I'm not really censoring myself since I'm still giving the info, but I'm cautious there because YouTube is effective. Like a lot of people found me through there, so I decided, okay, I'll keep it. But I'm really sick of being censored on there, and the ADLs attacked me on there. My original film, War by Deception, got my account deleted in 2008. I redid it in 2011, and they took the movie down. I got it back up like September 13th or so. I guess that was the 12th, 13th in Japan. Got it back up, but I missed the big, traffic from 9/11. I had 9/11 bomb. Everybody on Facebook and stuff were recommending the movie to everyone. But my film really gets in and doesn't have anything kooky in it. It sticks to the evidence in the documents. And it really slams them on the Iraq War, because I think that's even worse than 9/11, because we've murdered over 1 million people, which is a lot worse than nearly 3,000. But 9/11 is central because that was the catalyst that led to all these wars. We're in a new era now. I mean, we've got 6, 7 multiple wars going on. We are following the PNAC plan to the T. A little later than they thought they wanted it. But, we've invaded Libya and tortured and murdered the leader there and replaced him with puppet despots. We're in Afghanistan. We're in bombing Pakistan and Yemen and Somalia. We're still in war in Iraq. Just a dozen people murdered yesterday. It's insane. And we're going to go broke. And we've got it in the empire. So I'm supporting Ron Paul as the best of the choices we got right now. We need free markets, freedom, prosperity, and stick to the Constitution and end all this imperialism. But easier said than done. There's a lot of dummies out there.
I agree. There's a lot of people that they don't even want to look into this stuff. There's still people that want to laugh at you when you bring up false flag terrorism. It's sad. Or like I said to you, about yesterday, I noticed right away in the OWS, the Occupy Wall Street live stream chat, that if somebody mentioned the word Zionism, that people didn't even know what it was. And I said, it's a political ideology. And they were screaming up and down, no, that's not what it is. And I was like, you really have no idea what it is.
They're like, that's not what it is. It says so on Wikipedia.
Exactly. Well, on Wikipedia,
Wikipedia ought to be renamed I just wrote this or something, like it has.
I'm lying.
It's just like it has the word pedia in it to make it sound like encyclopedia, but it just appeals to the lowest common denominator. The only stuff that makes any sense on it is what it cut and pasted from an actual encyclopedia. But it's really, up to. I kind of think this is what they ought to name it, because it's just up to anyone to edit whatever about whatever they think is true. And the megaphonies get paid. The Israelis go in and edit Wikipedia on purpose. So rather than Zionism being a racist ideology of apartheid, which ethnically cleansing their neighbors, which they are doing in the West Bank and turning Gaza Strip into an outdoor prison, no, they just say, oh, it's the movement for the diaspora to have a homeland for Jewish culture and blah, blah, blah. They're not protecting Jewish culture. They are invading Palestine and murdering the indigenous people of that land and saying God said so. Just tack a religion on there. That's Zionism, is a political ideology of Likudniks and ardent racists. I mean, they have segregated high schools. They have highway. You know that? Even in Israel proper, Arabs and Jews and Christians, they don't go to the same school. Jews have a school for themselves, and they got a school for everyone else. And in the West Bank, on the highways, they've got color-coded license plates. And Jewish Israelis get the right color license plate, and then the other ones, I don't remember if it's blue or yellow or whatever, the lesser degree one is, you can't come on that road. You got to go through these other ones on these checkpoints and things. And this isn't even in Israel. This is the occupied territory of the West Bank. You got to go on this highway. We're on this highway. It's reminiscent of you sit in the back of the bus, I get in the front of the bus. So it's worse than that. They're like, no, you're not even allowed on the same road in your own country. Unbelievable. They spazzed out about the UNESCO vote. I mean, I could go on about Israel forever, but it's about 4 in the morning here. But well, I'll come back on sometime.
Thanks for coming on again, Ryan. Is there anything else you want to plug?
In case you live in Virginia, especially in the 6th district, we need to support Karen Kwiatkowski. She's an anti-neocon. She's running for Congress. Anti-war, cut aid to Israel, all good stuff. Karen Kwiatkowski, in Karen K for Congress, I think is her website. Support her, and I just want to give a shout out to Rivero and Adam Kokesh, and thank Federal Jack as well, and Bob for having me on earlier. And you got to support alternative media. So donate to all these people and support them because this is how we win the game. Once we can break corporate media, everything else, the whole system falls apart. That's their main method of control is to control information. So I just want to tell everyone to support alternative media.
I agree 100%. Alternative media is kicking mainstream media's ass, and that's why they're afraid of us.
Yeah, you are. We are. I guess I am media, I guess. But
I would consider you part of the alternate media because you do have a website and you do run your YouTube channel and you make commentary. So and you at least show things and you show facts. And so yeah, you can be considered part of the alternative media.
I kind of use my YouTube as a radio show. I interview people and stuff on there. I had Liberty Radio for a few months. It's just hard for me with the time zone stuff to do it. I'm not in the U.S., so I mean I'll do it when I go back. I've been asked by everyone, but yeah, we'll see what the future brings.
I hear that. I'll let you go because I know it's late. Next time you come on, I'll have you pontificate about Japan a little more. I'll let you rant. Thanks for coming on, Ryan. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Take it easy, dude.
Take it easy.